Coming up as the playoffs roll on for the NBA, we realize that the Brooklyn Nets may have a much harder road in their rebuild than we first thought. We dive in, coming up next.
You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, my friends, it is the Locked On Nets podcast right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. He's Doug Norrie. I'm Adam Marbeck. We thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. We're 100% free on all those great platforms. And, of course, we let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel is going to give you new customers a chance at $200 and $50 as well. That's $250 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Get over to FanDuel.com today. And, oh, by the way, Doug, looks like the heat stroke is finally taking its toll on me as we talk about the Brooklyn Nets' critical offseason.
Excellent moment before we'll get talking Nets here in a second, but excellent note from before the show, and anyone watching on YouTube is going to notice this, that I said something's wrong with your camera filter because you look real pink. And Adam spent about five minutes fooling around with different settings and just trying to get it to look right. And then he leaned back, and I could just see his neckline was like, pasty white. And I said, "Oh, it's just sunburn." He goes, "Oh yeah, it was sunburn. I was sitting outside all week." And I was like, "Oh baby." So yeah, I was like, maybe we should have done a check-in on like the state of your skin. I just mostly didn't want anyone to do like a wellness check if they're watching the video and be like, "Hey, maybe we should just send someone out to do a little door knock to make sure this guy's all right. He's okay." Even though the skin color would definitely suggest otherwise.
No, listen, you don't, and we'll get into it. We'll talk basketball. But when you start out as the palest Irishman on the face of planet Earth, and then you expose yourself to, I'm talking about, could have been 7 hours, might have been 3 minutes. The bottom line is I was outside in partial to almost direct sunlight, and this is the result that you get. Thankfully, no one's going to focus on that over on YouTube as we break down the Brooklyn Nets offseason, where we were talking about the NBA playoffs. Obviously, there's been some interesting things going on there. Western Conference. Hey, LeBron James, maybe you are too old, as the Timberwolves got the first game of that series underneath their belt. About how, though, the landscape of the NBA is maybe more balanced than we thought it would be going into a big, deep draft class. And that actually could be a big hurdle for the Brooklyn Nets to overcome.
Yeah, look, there's definitely some parity happening in the NBA. Now, we might get to the end of the season and say, okay, well, it's just OKC and Boston, and there's the two top teams won out. But I think if we look at how these playoffs are starting to shape up, and yes, there's some clear favorites, but there are some other teams that are very strong here. Like there is Boston. They look like they're going to probably just be very similar to what they had last year. We know OKC, completely dumpster in Memphis in that first game, and is coming off a generational defensive season performance where the defense was just so great. And then you have Cleveland, who looks really, really strong. Their first playoff game in all season long. So you have three teams that look completely elite. And then you have a group of teams below them that maybe aren't of like that same caliber, but are still very good and have lots of good players. Like the Knicks are like this. Pacers to a lesser degree. The Bucks, they lost the game, but they still have Giannis. So as long as they have him, and I'm going to get to Giannis too, because it's like somewhat instructive about what we're going to talk about the Nets here. And then you go across, it's like, well, the Rockets, they played an absolute just rock fight with the Warriors, but you saw the Warriors with Steph. The Lakers are going to have Doncic here for years. So like that's kind of set. Looks like Jokic, even for what they're doing, is going to be with the Nuggets, and they have some other guys around them. And it's like, and then even the Clippers, I'm not too worried about them in the future, even though I still think they could be feisty this year. The point is, we're like making a list of a decent amount of teams here that are not championship favorites by any means, but good to decent to very good, right? Yeah. And when that list is long and you are at stage one of a rebuild, it can take a long time to start catching up with some of these teams. And I at the risk of being like Debbie Downer about this, I think this is the right path, by the way. Like they had to do this. They had to do a full reset. They had to just kind of get as much draft capital as possible, take as many bites at the apple. I just want to pump the brakes for anyone. And there's some people out there that kind of write this stuff. And I just have to push back on it. Like that think that this reset's going to be short. I just don't see how it's really possible. And again, sometimes you just have to go through some pain for stuff like this. Like that's the case. I'm advocating for the path that they're taking here. But looking at the general landscape of the NBA, it's hard to see how the Nets could or should speed up the timeline when you look at sort of how much some of these other teams have and what it would take along the talent acquisition lines to begin even start competing with them. It is like a bit intimidating to look at. Does that make sense? Like, I think I'm trying to be I'm not concise with it for sure, but like I'm trying to like take a look at the whole NBA and then compare it to what the Nets have and like what would need to happen and say, hey, this might take like 4 years, 5 years for it to kind of come around without forcing the issue.
Yeah, and so I'll do this here before we talk about like the Eastern Conference specifically, and there's some silver lining reasons around this, and we're going to talk why the draft is so critical. But you mentioned like when you go over in the West, okay, well, Rockets, a lot of young talent, maybe not that elite superstar, but there's certainly be a couple steps ahead of where the Brooklyn Nets are, right, in their process. The Warriors sustain excellence for a long time. Okay, what's going to happen with their aging veterans? Doesn't really matter. Lakers, always good. Timberwolves, not championship, but they're there, and they just beat the Lakers, so who knows? Maybe we'll find out in these playoffs. Nuggets, Clippers, you say, maybe a little tumultuous, but certainly have been around the fray with their players. And then Grizzlies haven't been able to get it together. But Thunder, much like I'd say Houston, just in terms of, hey, went through the difficult time, draft capital, found a way to navigate up to a place, right? So all those teams, point being, are either obviously well-established and long-sustained successful teams or ones that are a couple seasons ahead of the Brooklyn Nets. When we flip over to the Eastern Conference, we can have that separate conversation coming in a minute. But I do think you're right. The silver lining is if it takes a little bit longer, well, then there's maybe a chance that LeBron James finally retires. I mean, it's things they have Luka now in LA, so that's going to change it, right? The timelines are fluid around these things. Players get older and there is turnover. The biggest, I think, hurdle when we have this conversation at a high level is the great teams around the league always tend to maintain greatness. They always maintain sustainability. So you're always going to have 8-ish to 10 teams maybe that are the hurdle you're trying to get over in order to be one of those teams considered to be championship contender. And it's not just, as we'll discuss here in a second, getting that one superstar. Doug will break down the Milwaukee Bucks and Giannis, and we can take a look at the East here as well, and whether or not I think the Nets can get into that discussion a little bit sooner than if they were playing out West. We'll do that here in just one moment.
All right, let you know the NBA playoffs are here. FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in the action right now. When you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you're going to get a $250 in bonus bets if your bet wins. Look, FanDuel makes betting so easy. Maybe you're just betting your favorite team in the playoffs. Maybe you're diving into player props. By the way, start diving into the player props now, and good luck coming up for air for the next time we talk about FanDuel. That's how long it's going to take it to go through all these things. They got the three-pointers, steals, assists. FanDuel has so many ways to bet your favorite player props. Plus, when the game tips off, you can combine those live prop bets into same-game parlay. Maybe you were following along with Adam the other day when he basically called it that the Pistons just had that game in hand. And if you live bet the Knicks from then on, you were absolutely banking over on FanDuel because he just set it in stone. He said, Pistons got this. And it was like 22 points to nothing later. That game was OVER. Don't miss and head on over to FanDuel.com to claim your $250 in bonus bets today over at FanDuel.com.
All right, so as we continue today's Locked On Nets episode, talking about the Brooklyn Nets offseason, the draft, why that's so critical, and we're going to get that here in a second. Go through the Giannis scenario about this, as we discussed this offseason before, but I think I handily discussed the West and how good and consistent a lot of those teams are. Even in the East, go get a superstar. We know that that's not an automatic. You're going to be championship contender, conference final contender, etc.
It's nowhere close to automatic. It's nowhere close to because we saw from the first game. I mean, they have Giannis. Dame gets hurt. Then that team is really pretty weak behind him, right? But like even without Dame, they got really like nothing. I mean, got Kuzma, who's terrible. I mean, I'm sure you saw Kuzma's line, the 0-0-0-0-0 in 23 minutes in a playoff game. Not too bad. Solid. But so like you see, like okay, well they have a top 5 player in Giannis. Giannis is one of the top 3 MVP candidates this year with Jokic and SGA. And they were like, it's going to be real hard for them to advance. So, right, you're getting a window into like how just having one good player and not a lot behind it is just not a formula in the current NBA. It really wasn't at all. But like with the more parity and just players getting better across the board, you just need a lot with these guys now. It's just not good enough to just have one guy. Go across to the West and look at Durant and Booker. They had Durant and Booker who played most of the season. And they didn't even make the playoffs. And Durant was like really good this year. KD had an individual very good season. Now Booker had a little bit of a down season, and they've been kind of a dumpster fire for a while here in terms of being able to get it together. And, you know, Beal was horrible, but still, I mean, like we have a couple examples of guys who are like really good, and it's just not enough. Like, you need so much else in place now in the current NBA, which is why like a long rebuild, like even just, and sometimes the Nets fans want to do this thing too, where they double count the assets. It's like, well, I got Cam Johnson and Nick Claxton, and they got all these draft picks, and they're going to get a superstar. It's, well, you're going to have to lose some of that to get one of these superstars in, right? Like, you can't keep everything. And all. We're not going back to the KD and Kyrie era here, where they just do them a massive favor and sign them off the street. Basically, that's just not happening with any of these guys anymore. And so, I just really want to like have people take a look at the landscape and say, okay, one, getting one of these top players, which you have to have, by the way. So I'm an advocate for getting these guys. I'm just saying you have to have lots of other things in place to start making it realistic. And again, look no further than some of these guys who are among the best players in the game, and it's just not enough to get it done. So this is the case for patience and like long, multiple tanking seasons to kind of like even get enough. Now, maybe they crush the draft this year, and they kind of have to, right? With all the picks they have to get a lot out of this draft. Like, they just have to. There's like not, they have some wiggle room, but they have to absolutely crush the draft. And then they got to crush next year's draft too, just to be able to set the baseline for enough talent to be able to contend with some of these other teams that are already multiple years ahead. Right? Pistons, multiple years ahead. Magic, for whatever they are, still multiple years ahead with like proven kind of star level players. Those are the teams that are coming next down the line. Not to mention Spurs, who have Wemby and now De'Aaron Fox. Like, these teams that didn't even make the playoffs, right? So like,
I'm gonna say right.
There's
We're
just
looking at the playoff picture, but there's also the teams that didn't make it, but still could get there in the next couple of seasons. I mean,
Wembanyama could be a top 1 player in the league in like 4 years if he can stay healthy. I know like the clots and stuff are a problem, but like, I'm just saying that it's like, this is why we advocated so much for like just trying to capitalize them as much as you could on the draft odds, because like, this is a long thing. This isn't like, honestly, they could get Cooper Flagg and still be 5 years away. Right?
Well,
like, and so it's just a long thing. We've seen these teams that have taken a long time to do it. These are the ones that are in positions to kind of say, now we have all the pieces in place. It's not just one dude.
And it's funny because I know someone will bring up, well, but Milwaukee won with Giannis. Yes, when they had Chris Middleton in the prime of his career, when
and
they
Drew
had
Holiday
Lopez after he had transitioned in, and when they brought in Drew Holiday, right? So it's like, that was having Giannis and then adding in multiple other high-level players that do very specific things incredibly well. And, we always talk about the 5 for the Brooklyn Nets, and then you look around the league, and you've done a great job consistently reminding everybody, like, yeah, go find the guy. Go find the 5 that not only can defend really well in the paint and do those things defensively, but also can stretch the floor for you. Brook Lopez, by the way, ironically was once a Brooklyn Net upon a time when they drafted him, but he didn't develop and become that guy until he left the Brooklyn Nets, right? Final year before they jettisoned him, they said, hey, why don't you develop your 3-point shot? So you need all of those elements to come together, and you're seeing different iterations, as you mentioned, the Suns this year, even Milwaukee, though they have Dame and injuries, etc. It's not necessarily going to be the same caliber. So that's the rough part about this. In the East, I'll just say briefly, before we get into, actually, I'm going to stay on the draft because you brought that up as well. The part about the draft that is critical is about winning the draft. Winning the draft from a Brooklyn Nets standpoint, when you have 4 first-round picks, you need 2 of those guys. Even if you say, we're going to walk through, starting next week, we're going to walk through all the scenarios of the Nets spike the number 1 pick, the 2, the 3, the 4, and how that trickles down throughout the draft process for them. But as you said, if you get Cooper Flagg, you still have to hit on one of those other 3 picks that you have in the first round. One of those guys has to come up as not necessarily an elite superstar, but he has to be a guaranteed starter by the time whenever you determine that first season, second season, and then the next draft, you have to do it again, where another guy is a guaranteed high-level starter. Now you have 3. A superstar and 2 really good starters. Now, if you go get a Drew Holiday or you go have player X, Y, or Z, then you start having the conversation. So it's a slow building process that doesn't have to be negative. Like we're talking about this as in pump the brakes around when you think the Brooklyn Nets can be ready to compete. It's just that be ready for it to take longer. And be ready to look at it like Detroit. Be ready to look at it like OKC. It's going to be a year over year, maybe steady kind of build here. And then all of a sudden it could take a jump, like with the Thunder the last 2 seasons. That'll be awesome. But that didn't happen starting 2 seasons ago. It was the 3 seasons prior to that helped get them to that place. The only thing I'll say before we talk maybe a little bit more about the draft and the positioning of it all for Brooklyn is when you look in the East, like you mentioned the Magic, listen, the reality being that like the injuries of this season certainly made it look different. The play-in tournament, I think, showed off really where they probably could have been. But they're a team that is catchable, I'll say, over the next couple of seasons. The Pistons, if the Brooklyn Nets get Cooper Flagg or an elite overall talent in this draft class, how far away are they from being in that discussion in terms of the roster build? Pacers can't have that conversation. The Heat got in there on guile and coaching and everything else. Awesome. The East, at least, is the better of the two conferences to be.
Oh, yes.
You want to be the scrappy team, right? Because the Atlanta Hawks they're not talking about them, right? The play-in tournament teams are not nearly as interesting in the East as they are in the West. So that does help. It matters that the Brooklyn Nets could maybe spike this pick. The tricky part would be, well, what if the Wizards, right? They're also playing for the number one lottery odds here. If they end up getting the number one pick, now you're actually competing maybe with one of the bottom dwellers of the East to see who builds up their roster first effectively.
Yeah, and you're right. You're right about the East. Like that is the pushback here is the East is the much weaker of the two, right? And so you have two teams that are like clear favorites here with the Cavs and the Celtics, and both of them are championship contenders for sure. Cavs also took like this kind of like slow approach. It's like draft Garland, draft Mobley, get Allen on kind of just get Allen gifted to you in the Harden trade, and then go out and add Donovan Mitchell. And you're like, okay, well, now we have a team that can really, really make some noise, and they add some shooters and kind of let's see how it goes with Kenny Atkinson, right? So like that's another team.
By the way, I'm ignoring the the 76ers who had injuries this year. I don't know what's going to happen with them. And even by the way, like mentioning Chicago, not a team I'm talking about competing for titles, but they're going to be a competitive team. So the Nets do have to at least.
Raptors should be better next year. Raptors should be better. Like presumably Milwaukee will be kind of like worse, but like, and so. Yes, it's much better for the Nets to be in the East. But also some of these other teams are still in the East too, and you can see them like the Pistons, who everyone, kind of tread on for so long being bad. Like you can starting to see it happen now, right? It's like pain, but Cade plus Osser and some other guys, and now you're interesting. And even then against the Knicks the other day, it's like, well, they're getting their first test. It's like, yeah, this is their first test. I think they're going to be better. I think that graph is like definitely pointing up for the Pistons for sure. But it's like they're just getting into this thing now around after a consensus number one pick in Cade. Cade was a clear-cut number one pick at the time. Yep. And it's like, okay, well, whatever. Like year 4 is when it kind of starts to come around for a guy. And kind of all the other things have to fall in place. And you have to have, maybe missing a couple guys in the draft. It's like this just stuff takes long. And it's not negative. It's just like the reality. That's just the reality of the situation. It's like, this is the reality. And I just get a little worried when I see other people in the Nets ecosystem thinking it's going to be like really quick. Like, it's just not, I've seen this from like people that write about this stuff a lot. It's like, oh, they got all these things. And like, it's going to be a quick turnaround. It's like, I don't know about that.
It's all building towards next off season, and everything will come together in the blink of an eye.
And I'm only positioning it against these other teams where it's like, these teams have lots of good players. They have lots of good players. Like they have stars, and then they have excellent role players. And that just means the Nets are further away. So just don't sell fans a false bill of goods around what it takes in the NBA to really build a contender over the long term. It takes a long time, and that's it. And I get worried when I just see other people. I don't know if it's for clicks or they just like really don't understand. Like, I think there's like probably like a misunderstanding for some people, like just not really getting it of like how the NBA works, unfortunately. But like, that's just the reality of the situation. Like, this stuff just doesn't happen quickly. And the Nets, unfortunately for Nets fans, the Nets kind of like one time got super lucky in like the one scenario where they could reset this thing really fast into a championship contender. And even that took like 2 years because KD couldn't play the first year. You know what I mean? Even that wasn't even instantaneous. And obviously it flamed out in epic fashion. So I don't know. I'm just mostly responding to what I like a group of people that I think are not shooting fans straight with the reality of the situation.
Coming up here in a second, another little tidbit around the cautionary tale of putting all of your eggs into the short-term basket, and also those NBA playoffs. What have we been enjoying so far in the early stages of the first round? We'll do that here in just one moment. All right. As we tie a pretty little bow on today's Locked On Nets episode, talking about how I look ill on camera, and also the Brooklyn Nets offseason and how critical it is for them to win this draft. I mean, we're going to talk about starting next week, as I mentioned before, the draft and the different situations. But like, the 2 of these 4 need to be hits in order to feel like it's going in the right direction. I mentioned cautionary tale because I think, to your point, when you're speaking about inside the Nets ecosystem, I think there's 2 things that are happening here. One, I think a lot of people are referencing got Kyrie Irving, got Kevin Durant, went and got James Harden. And that is an opportunity that the Nets organization can revisit over the next couple of seasons if they want to. And you've already said it, but I'm just going to drill it home. Like, that's not the way it's working anymore. That, by the way, that wasn't the way it was working then. It just happened to be that these two very specific players were in a position coming off of injuries, having a bit of a bad reputation around the league in the moment, needed a place to go. And the Brooklyn Nets were open arms saying, hey, we're a place that can't necessarily get people to come here. So great, let's do this experiment. And guess what? It didn't ultimately work out. And it did take a little bit of time to reach that place of toe on the line and not advancing in those playoffs and then it falling apart. That's the one side of it. The other side of it is that every time that someone references the Brooklyn Nets have all this cap space and they'll have next draft class, and then the following summer, they're going to hit it when at star X and Y and Z. When you mention a team like Detroit and then you can see it coming on for them, guess what? They may want to have a conversation about saying, oh, Giannis, you want to come play with Cade Cunningham? He just showed you he's about to be a star. Maybe we'll talk to you guys about that, right? Like all these other teams, it always seems the picture that gets painted is when nobody else comes to market and the Brooklyn Nets have their pick of the litter, they'll get everything that they want to fall into place. Every other team is always evaluating about how they can get better.
Right.
You have no idea what the Denver Nuggets are going to decide to do. They just completely cleaned house in their front office. They're still in the playoffs. They're not getting rid of the Joker anytime soon, but they may think about how they want to construct themselves around him going forward. Then you better believe there's going to be a lot of players that are very interested in going to Denver potentially to play alongside him. So the Nets still need to have the first star in order to sell to potential players they want to bring here. And that's where it starts with the draft and maybe getting lucky and spiking higher odds and having a Cooper Flagg, a Dylan Harper, whoever it may be, all of a sudden have players around the league go, that's a guy that I would want to go play with.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's why they need to crush the draft this year. They need to crush next year's draft as well. Like just to set a base of like sort of like contention down the line. These things just take a long time to build. It's just the way the NBA is set up now with the way stars sort of can lock in their money early, which means you have to like go out and trade for them later, right? Like there's just not, because they're smart and they're locking in like max money as quickly as possible, which is like anyone smart would do. Also, it's like lock in max money and ask for a trade later. Like, okay, that's the walking line for every single player now. And you'd be crazy to play it all the way out. Like sometimes the guys who wait, like Harden, kind of screw themselves financially. And so you're nuts to not just take the money early and then just be a squeaky wheel later. And so that's why these guys they're mostly just not going to hit the free agent market. And then I think the Nets understand this. Like I think Sean Marks is like really clear about like, hey,
I think the Brooklyn Nets, I think the front office and Sean Marks and Joe Tsai, I think they're as much aligned with what we're kind of discussing here and far further away from the idea of like, let's jump back into superstar waters. Doesn't mean they're not open to it, but I think they get the idea of like, we need to just keep stacking the assets here in terms of draft players.
I just don't know how you can look at the current state of the NBA and say to yourself, like, the Nets are close, even when you count their assets and everything else. Like, it just, these playoffs are just proving it. Just go back to the top of the show. Like, look at the teams that are really good right now and think about what it would, I don't mean like think about like what it would take to get Giannis. Think about what it would take to put together. It's like, just walk yourself through the moves. What would the Nets need to do right now to begin to have the talent base to start competing with OKC? Like, that's a lot of moves. With Boston, that's a lot. Boston's a better example because they're in the East. That's a lot of moves that need to happen. That's a lot of players and a lot of talent that needs to get added. It's fine. We knew it. We knew this was the case. The second they traded McHale, this was the understanding. It was like, strip it down to the studs, and we'll see you in 5 years. All good. You can't do it any other way. It sucks. Like, I don't want to be still very young, +5 what I am now, like, and +5 years to whatever I am. And
I don't want to be like super young and in my prime, but in the next couple of years be very old and no
still
longer
in my prime. like still very, I don't want to be 5 years later still prime. 100% in my prime like I am now, like maybe better in 5 years. But like, I think we just get it. I think we just get that like this is a thing. And so sometimes I wish the mechanics were a little easier to be better, quicker, right? Like I wish there was different ways to be able to do this. Yeah. When you shoot your shot and miss, which the Nets did, there aren't many other ways to pick up the pieces. Like you just have to go through significant pain. Like you just have to do it. Like you can't skip ahead. There's almost no way to skip ahead. The reason I know is because go tell me the team, unless you're the Lakers and like somehow Luka just lands in your lap, which is like ridiculous. But like other than situations like that, show me the teams now that have like skipped ahead in the process to be where they're really good now. Like you can't do it. Every one of these teams, I mean, I'm just going to make sure I'm correct here. Like every one of these teams is on a many year timeline through this of talent acquisition, kind of getting lucky with the right player, maybe like, kind of getting lucky that Brunson ends up being a star, kind of getting lucky that the Kings for some reason trade you Halliburton. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Pistons went through a lot of pain to even get to the 6th seed right now. Magic have gone through some pain to get to the 7th seed, and they're still kind of like on the outside looking in. And then go through the West. These teams are in like multi-year timelines with this. No one is
Spurs are going to be going
no
to
one
year
just
3
got good last year.
Yeah, Spurs are going to say, like, what do we need to do? And Wemby injuries, whatever. But Spurs are going to go into year 3 saying, like, so what's the next thing here that we need to do so we can really be talking about being an above 500 team who's in position to be in the play-in tournament and pushing for a playoff, a legitimate playoff seed. Like, and that's not a knock. That's just, hey, like that's what it takes. Generational talent. And then the next thing that you have to do for it. And by the way, it's funny too, because you go over and look at, I don't know, you can go back as far as you want, but the last 5-6 drafts, when you go through the top 10, just looking at it, and we know the odds and what the Nets could have, should have, would have done. But you're talking about like a 60% miss rate in terms of top 10 players, and then looking back a handful of years later and going, oh yeah, that guy, to whatever degree, whatever level, right? Like it's littered with misses. It's littered with okay players, with average guys who, again, as prospects, were viewed as worthy of being taken at X position in the draft. Now, some of them will develop a little bit later, but that's the other side of this too. Again, I'll go back to the top where you brought up. The Nets need to crush the draft. And it's not just they need to pick the right guy, 5th, 6th, 7th overall. It's that they have to, like any team, you have to get a little lucky. If it's not the automatic, the Cooper Flaggs, the Dylan Harpers maybe of the world, even these other guys, Ace Bailey, automatically, you already saw that for now the last couple of months. Hey, are we sure that he's going to be ready to go as an NBA player? Is there an attitude adjustment? How's he going to develop? Whatever it may be. All these dudes, they're all going to have that attached to them until you see it come to fruition. So when the Brooklyn Nets make that pick, maybe at 5 or 6 or 7, it's then going to be, did it work? And you may not know that in year 1, and maybe year 2 before you figure that out in that next draft class. And that's okay. Like it should be fun and exciting, but it has to be framed, or I would recommend that Nets fans frame the next couple of seasons through the right lens. Young guys, hoping they develop, seeing what can work, not, and all we have to do is wait. And then we go get player X and away we go. Like it's 2-year process. Maybe go get a star to pair with your young players and then talk about the next year, 3-4 years, right? 3-4 years before you're legitimately talking about being on the discussion of consistent playoff team. And then what's next to become a contender? What's next to challenge the best teams in the East and in the West when it comes to the NBA Finals? That's okay. I wish it was a little more, as you said, easy for the jockeying of teams, right? NFL style, year over year, one team can spring up and win the division. That's not the way the NBA is built. 5 guys on the court, a lot of superstar talent, elite players at the top. That's what it takes to ultimately be competitive in the NBA.
Yeah, that's just it. And so anyway, not trying to be like Debbie Downers here, but like just being like, hey, look, this is the reality of the situation, patience. And that's why you might just have to go through some pain first to be able to get to, the pot at the end of the rainbow, or whatever stupid analogy I could have just come up with there. All right. With that poetic transition,
like no problem there, buddy. Check that box.
Not the best. That one's done. Figure that one out perfect. Not interested in getting any notes on that one either. So just that is what it is. All right. Make sure you subscribe over to Locked On Nets over on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe on Spotify. You can leave comments on Spotify. Go leave a comment over on Spotify. A good comment. And 5 stars. That goes without saying. 5 stars, leave a comment, let everyone know how much you love it. That's it. If you're thinking about something else, don't do it. Just 5 stars or bust over on Spotify, YouTube as well. There you go. Got there.
I'm interested. Make a comment on YouTube about if it was unsettling to watch this whole episode with me. You know what I mean? Like it's visually not great. But I
will say the pinkness comes and goes depending on how you're leaning. So like like there's times where you're like, hey, it's fine, and then there's times where it's like might need an ambulance. So it goes between both. Yeah.
Allow me just to say that sunburns are a great way to tell the world that you're a slow learner, and that is from Anonymous.
Oh, one of the all-time great poets. Back in tomorrow talking more Brooklyn Nets basketball.
Basketball. My skin hurts. Basketball, yeah.